Hello, and welcome to my first episode of Creative Friday. First thing I want to touch on is I do have another channel where I do photography, gear reviews, photography discussion, things like that. And I do a lot of cuts and B-roll and all this stuff to keep a user's attention. And one of the things I'd like to do here is talk to you like an adult, keep this succinct, and get my message across as quickly as possible. Today's topic is about the trouble with the UX, UI, or the UI UX labels. No matter how you slash it, what it conveys to me is a misunderstanding of the design function at companies. So the first thing I want to do is just give you my interpretation of what user experience is. I think it's important for me to define UX because even within our own ranks, even within the design community, there is some disagreement about what UX means. I feel like you can't talk about user experience in tech without talking about Apple Computer. And the reason for that is I lived through one of the most amazing turnarounds of any company I've ever seen. They were almost bankrupt. They were almost gone. And at the very last second, they got a lifeline and they were able to start to produce products that literally saved their company. So in the early 2000s, when Apple, in the late 90s, they came out with the iMac, then they came out with the iPod, and then the iTunes Music Store. And all of this stuff was in the realm of Apple. I don't think many people really gave it much attention. They saw that something was happening, but they didn't care about it because Apple's market share was so small. But when Apple introduced iTunes Music Store for Windows and then the iPod support for Windows and people flocked to it, that's when the industry finally took notice. And a lot of people in the industry, they just couldn't believe that something that was just super easy to use really mattered to people. And they just felt like it was just Apple's great marketing or the great carnival barker. Steve Jobs was such a salesman that he would get people to act outside of their own best interests and buy this expensive product for a niche company. I think about those things today because those sentiments still remain. In the tech industry, there's just a lot of people that still maintain that the only reason you would ever buy a more expensive product is because you got sold a bill of goods through marketing. And that's those people, you can't have discussions with those people because they dismiss the idea of having something that works well as a driving factor for why you make decisions. In 2003, there was a New York Times Magazine article, which I'll link below, where Steve Jobs said, "Design is not just what it looks and feels like. Design is how it works." The reason I like that quote so much is it is exactly what I feel about design. It's so interesting. When you talk about design in my world, the front end, the interaction layer between a human and a computer, a lot of tech industry people, they just don't get it. They don't understand design. But if I tell you that a systems architect is designing a new system, they have no problem with that. But when I say we need to design something for the user, all of a sudden people just have wild misconceptions of what that means. As Apple grew and the iPod became a monster story in tech, like how did this little company create this iPod and iTunes Music Store that just captured the country's attention, the world's attention? They filled a void that was left by Napster, even though there were already digital music stores prior to the iTunes Music Store. As soon as that came out, and as soon as that very simple way of buying music was attached to iTunes and could be immediately transferred to your iPod, people just used it. They used it, and Real Player and Microsoft's own offering and whatever music stores, they just got obliterated. Nobody could understand why. Why did Apple eat their lunch? And it was because Napster was super easy. Anybody who got to experience Napster knew what it was like to search for a song and download it. iTunes Music Store became that, but legal. And I think people wanted to do the right thing. I think people wanted to pay for their music. They filled that void and they met the user's need. That is, in my opinion, the user experience. It is everything from top to bottom about a product. The entire product is the user experience, not just the front end. Almost immediately after, I feel like that's when I first started to see the term UX design. I don't think I thought much of it. I thought maybe it was a better term than information architecture. I think a lot of people in tech thought information architecture was a little too overblown. Although today I look back at that and I'm like, why did people think that? That's exactly what we were doing. We were architecting the information flow so a person could get from point A to point B to point C, in a natural, logical progression. But people did have a problem with it. So I thought UX design was a way to sort of soften the blow. I thought it was okay at the time. But looking back at it, it now seems inevitable that UX design would be confused with UI design and then fused together as UX UI. The reason for that is, as I've already stated, we can't even agree what UX means. But then when a company would post a job for a UX designer, an applicant who has been building websites, who has a great graphic design background, they design beautiful, wonderful, pixel perfect UIs, they would apply for the UX job because in their mind, the user interface was a huge factor in the user's experience, which is true. And then in that same job posting, a user researcher would apply for the UX job because as a researcher, as somebody who conducts user research, who likes to run workshops, who does usability studies, those people feel that their contribution is a major factor in the user experience, which is also true. And then there were people who like to wireframe and create user journey diagrams showing a user's progression through the system to get their job done. And those people felt that their contribution defined or made the user experience. And that was true. So how could these things all be true and they all apply for the user experience design job? And what ended up happening, I believe, is in tech, most of the people in tech still just thought of the graphic design on the front. They didn't care about the user research. They didn't care about accessibility. They didn't care about how it worked. They just wanted to take what they already had and they wanted you to make it look nice. So I think they started to put the /UI, UX UI, because they were trying to say to people, don't come and apply for this job if all you do is wireframe. They felt that that was not enough. They wanted somebody who would think like an information architect and somebody who wouldn't mind doing a user research study, but who was really great at UI design. And those people exist. I've done all of those. I actually know how to write my own front-end code. But the truth about that is it was not sustainable as a role. I would say that the company got about 50% of what I could do for each of those things. Context switching between all of those tasks was very difficult. And I was never the best at it when I was doing all of it. I think like with any industry, design deserves its own specializations. Every other industry, people specialize. People are allowed to specialize. Doctors, lawyers, engineers. But for some reason, people want a brand designer to be great at user interface design and user research. And it would be also great if you could write your own front-end code. That's just not a fair thing to ask people. But at no point do I refer to anybody as a UX designer, because the way I see UX is in order for the product to really meet that user need, to really meet the expectation of the user, everybody has to be involved. The entire company or the entire division doing that product, from leadership of the company to leadership of the product, to the engineering team, to the marketing team, to the design team, everybody has to be working together. The problem is people want to cut corners. And I think what happened with Sonos last summer and the fallout that is still happening from Sonos is a great lesson. And if you don't know what happened there, I will link to an article below that is really interesting. Essentially, they wanted to completely revamp their subsystem. And in order to do that, they had to build a new app on top of it that could access the new subsystem for their Sonos products. And when they released the app, they knew that the app did not have all the features, but they thought that it was so well designed and looked good that people would forgive the fact that it was missing features until they could bring it to parity with the old app. And that is not what happened. They released something that looked good and was garbage. And when you release something that looks good and is garbage, what you get is angry users. And those angry users ended up costing the CEO that person's job, and their stock price is still taking a dive. because they chose to make it look good rather than to make it work the way their users wanted it to work. So that is a fantastic lesson in skipping the user experience. I think this is where I'm going to wrap this up. I don't want to make this piece a downer. We have a bit of a road ahead of us. The CTO of OpenAI comes out on a stage at Dartmouth University and says publicly, openly, that she thinks, yes, AI will take some creative jobs, but maybe those creative jobs shouldn't have existed in the first place. This is not new. This really is not new. My entire career, I've worked with tech people, especially tech leadership, who really think the function of design is a silly function. Anybody could design if they just had more time. Any of their developers could do a good UI if they had more time. You're always going to meet people like that. And, those are the people that you just need to sort of power through. You can't allow those people to get in front of you. Most of the people that I've met that hold the idea that as long as the software works, what does it matter? Just give good training and people who can just figure it out. When you show them a better way, when you actually design something that's better than what they were thinking, those people are, swayed. Those people understand when they see it, why the design makes a difference. And I am very happy to say that more people like that have appeared in my career than the negative person who thinks design is silly. So it's not all doom and gloom. It's just right now is a kind of rough time for designers. I'll talk about the job market and portfolios over resumes. I'll talk about that in a future video because it really is kind of a rough state of things. Keep your chin up. I believe that this is just a rough stretch, and hopefully as designers we'll make it through. Anyway, if you like this, please remember to give it a thumbs up and subscribe because I plan on trying to do this every week. I will try to keep it short. This one was a long one because it's been on my mind. It's been festering, and I just really wanted to share my thoughts on it. I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.